Hi, everybody. Here, I'm going to try to give you some idea how the core methods, metal rhythm guitar and metal lead guitar, came to be, how I conceived them, what I was thinking as I went through them, and, give you a little more insight maybe and some context. So first I'll back up and just give you a little bit of background into it. When I was 20 years old, I was playing in a band, practicing every day, and I was also teaching guitar on the side. And I was teaching at a music store, and I came to find that I was pretty good at teaching, and I had a reputation already as being a good lead player. And I would learn stuff people would bring in, and learn it by ear and show them how to play it, solos and so forth. So one day, the publisher, the editor of the publisher, Hal Leonard, he was out touring and going to music stores. He was talking to us teachers about the Hal Leonard guitar method because, of course, they want, to introduce all of their guitar methods to the teachers, because if the teachers start using them, of course, then they'll get bigger volumes of sales. So they want everyone to know what's in these books, what they're missing, and why they should be using them. So he went through that and showed us the things. And then I asked him after, and I said, hey, there aren't any books out there, though, that actually teach what people really want to learn. At least, the kids that are coming and taking lessons from me, 9 out of 10 of them, they wanted to learn how to play hard rock songs and solos. I asked him, how come you don't have anything that teaches that? And he said, well, why don't you write it? I think that's a good idea. He knew that they needed that. And he told me later that, in fact, he had said the same thing to like 20 other people. Nobody else followed through. But I took that opportunity, and I was one of the few people that actually followed through. And so I wrote a book, and they liked it. Unfortunately, however, what I did was I collected a bunch of solos that were, popular songs, and started with easier solos and then worked them up. And they liked the idea, but then they came to find that they couldn't publish it because they needed to get permission, and pay royalties on all of these songs. And by the time they did that, there's no ability to pay me to write the book or pay any additional royalty. And so therefore it wasn't financially viable to do something like that. And the first book I wrote, of course, then was never published. But I was so determined that after that, I thought, well, hey, here's the publisher. The problem is I can't use copyrighted material. Well, then the next thing is, well, I guess I have to figure out how to write a method with my own material. As I thought about that, I thought, well, I could probably do that for a rhythm guitar method, because I could imagine what it would take to get up to, a competent playing level, break it down. And I realized a couple things. First of all, as a musician, the first thing you need is you've got to have, a good sense of timing. Every note you play, it's sounds arranged in time. That's what musicians are dealing with. And what is time? Well, time is divided by pulse. And so every note you play has a relationship to pulse. Downbeats, upbeats, offbeats, triplets, whatever. Well, if every note you play has to be defined by pulse somewhere, then if you can't feel where the pulse is, you're sunk, because you're never going to be in time. So the first step, of course, that I realized in a rhythm guitar method is what it's really all about is, you need to be able to make your chord shapes and move them around, and do them when you want to do them. But you also need the control of the when, which means you need to develop the ability to feel pulse as you play. I needed to structure a method then that started with simple pulse, simple rhythms, simple chords sliding around, and then, gradually, step by step, increase it, gradually increase tempos and complexity of rhythm. But the biggest thing about these guitar methods, the thing that sort of shaped them into being what they were, was the decision I made with regard to reading music. Because up to my books, everything that was published was using standard notation. All the methods would teach you how to read music, and then gradually, more and more complicated melodies and, different positions, and then, you're playing chords and all the rest. Well, there's a problem with that, okay? Couple problems. Now, I knew how to read music. I played an instrument in band, and then when I came over to start playing guitar, I picked up one of those beginner books and learned, the notes on the guitar. And, so I understood that side of the picture, but I also knew that when I went to play rock, I didn't learn it by reading notation. I learned it by ear. And furthermore, all of the players that are writing the songs or recording the songs and performing, they're not reading music. Most of them can't read music. And the ones that do, are they actually using that? Well, no, not really, not in any significant way. So I had a problem right there. Am I going to show somebody how to read music? It's not a bad thing to learn how to do, but it's not directly connected to the technique or the performance or the creating. You want a career and be a good guitar player? Well, I'm not going to tell you not to learn how to read music, but I'm going to say it's kind of a sideline. It's an adjunct. You can be a great player without reading music. So let's teach you the techniques and the things you absolutely need to know to get into playing the stuff you want to play, and let's get right to it. And I don't want to mess, therefore, with reading music. So that simplified things a lot, because then I don't have to teach, all that aspect of it on top of the rest of the stuff, which I thought was more important. So I made that decision to knock it out. Now, to me, it was kind of a no-brainer as I just kind of thought through the issue. I was told later by one of the VPs at the publisher, he said, wow, that was a really groundbreaking idea. It took a lot of guts. And I was thinking, there's no other way to do it, So I didn't think it was guts. Maybe it's my ignorance. But it was such a break with tradition. It was a break with the way things were done before. And, I just looked at it as a practical issue and said, okay, well, what do we need to learn to do this? This is the goal. How do we get there? And so it was just an obvious thing. But then, of course, I had to figure out, well, how do I communicate? How am I going to notate this? And I had, of course, tablature existed, but there was no rhythm notation with tablature. There would be staff notation that had, its rhythm notation as part of the staff. Of course, pitch and rhythm is all there. And then tab was this alternative to just look at where you put your fingers. But of course, most guitar players aren't reading the music. They're ignoring the notes in the staff. They're ignoring the rhythms. They're just seeing the tablature numbers, where to put your fingers, and they're trying to get the rhythm just by trying to copy how it sounds. So I thought, well, that's not good enough. I need to actually show people how to play music because I have to show them time. So I wanted to do it in tab. I wanted rhythm notation. So I sort of said, okay, let's just fuse it together. So I just started writing it on tabs, and I just made it up the way I put rhythm notation on it. And of course, the publisher had never published anything like this before. What they actually did, I don't really know what they did for those first few books, exactly how they did this. It was 1985, and there wasn't a whole lot of computer stuff happening back then. Apparently, there was a time before computers. I know that in the 90s, when we redid it, they used Adobe Illustrator, a graphics program, to literally draw the notation and the staff and the symbols and just move them around. So I don't exactly know how they did it in 1985, whether it was an early program of some sort or whether they just did it, in a graphics, how they did graphics back then. But I do remember working with them extensively, going back and forth. They would engrave some music, and I'd look at it and I'd say, let's reduce the sizes of the fingerings. They were, too busy. If you have a page full of stuff that's busy, it's like incomprehensible. And so what we did was we worked on it so that the important stuff could kind of jump out a little bit, and the notation would, the rhythm notation would be clear. The fingerings would be there, but they, their size and their location and, the picking indications, everything had to kind of work in a balanced way without being too distracting. So we spent a lot of time with that. I'd like to say one more thing here about music notation, reading the staff and so forth? Well, actually, a couple of things. But the first thing I want to say is that, the notation is not the music. It's just a means of conveying the music. The music is sound. And if I had a choice between, okay, you could be a really good sight reader and read the music, or you could really connect with the sound and express the sound, what am I going to choose? Well, I want the sound, screw the notation, So a lot of guitar players have this idea, though, that if they can't read music, somehow they're not legitimate musicians. And most guitar players are notoriously bad at sight reading. Now, that is a big part of the reason why I looked at it, and I looked at what it would take to teach sight reading and then what it would take to teach technique. And it's like as hard or harder to teach people how to sight read as it is to show them the technique. And, put your finger here, here, and here, do this, play this rhythm. Now you're playing the song. Okay, we go right to the music with bypassing this whole thing of having to learn notation. All of the other methods, though, like the basic Hal Leonard method, and they had little, supplemental books, rock licks and stuff like that. But the whole method was grounded in teaching staff notation. It was like, this is the window. We all have to come through staff notation in order to learn the language of music, and then we're going to develop our technique. And so what that really did is it pushed technique way, way off, and we have to go through this very long, difficult, laborious process of learning how to read staff, which ultimately is kind of irrelevant to playing rock. The reason that guitar players are bad at sight reading, it really isn't their fault. It's not like they're not doing due diligence or they're just too lazy or whatever to get it together. Well, that's not really it. The problem is that the staff is not well suited for a chromatic instrument like the guitar. You see, the staff was developed and invented to communicate the music with the keyboard. The keyboard and the staff really develop together. So they go hand in hand, and they're based on diatonic scales. So the basic 7-tone, meaning diatonic, major scale, and its counterpart, the minor scale. And let's take a look at a keyboard real quick. If you look at a piano, you see that pattern, 2 black keys, 3 black keys, and then it repeats over and over. Well, that's because of the major scale formula, which is the pattern of whole and half steps that it takes to create the major scale, that 7-tone scale we talked about. So look to the left of each pair of black keys. Okay, that's your starting point. That's going to be C. And then you go, for the major scale, you go whole step, half step. Well, every time you do a whole step, what that means is to get to the next step of the scale, which is the next white key, you have to skip a note. Okay, so on the guitar, you skip a note by going 2 frets. Well, that intervening note, that middle fret, that becomes a black key. So we do a whole step, and a half step, and that's 2 black keys. And then we do 3 whole steps, 3 whole steps and a half step, that's 3 black keys. So that's your major scale structure right there. And what we did on a piano is we took those intervening notes that we're not going to use in the major scale, and we pulled them out and pulled them back, made them black keys so that the white keys would be the major scale. It makes it really easy to play a diatonic major scale, right? Because we don't have to worry about what notes to skip. Of course, if you pulled those keys forward and you had essentially all the keys in order, like you'd have a chromatic piano, it would be really difficult to play because you'd have to skip a bunch of notes. And that's kind of what you have if you have a guitar string. It's chromatic, and that's why I say a guitar is a chromatic instrument. Of course, it's even harder because we have, multiple strings and they're all chromatic, but I'll get there in a second. Now on the staff, you essentially have the same thing as what we just did with the white keys on the piano. In other words, every line and space that's on the staff is a different pitch. Okay, higher pitches are higher, lower pitches are lower. And no matter where you put a dot, a note on that staff, it's always going to be in the diatonic scale, the same way that whatever white key you hit, it's always going to be in that same major scale. Well, on the staff, it's going to be in that same major scale. How'd they do that? Well, just the way they took the black keys out, the same thing. On the scale, they took all of those black keys out so that when there is no key signature or no accidentals, you're looking at the white keys. So reading the staff is really tailor-made to the keyboard, and it's pretty easy to learn how to read music for the keyboard because there's only one place to play each note. So you see a note on the staff, and it's this note on the piano, and that note is a different note. And on the piano, every octave, of course, is the same. It's the same pattern over and over. Again, pretty easy then to learn how to read music. On the guitar, though, it's a completely different story. On the guitar, we have multiple places to play the same note. And what does that mean? Well, it means that I can play in this position and play the notes of this scale, or the same notes on the staff can look different if I move to a different position. I can play the same scale here, or here, or here, or here, and it's a different pattern at each point. And not only is there then 7 times as many ways to play, that same major scale, 7 different positions potentially, there's also choices between those positions. So I can go positionally across, or I can go up one string, or I can go diagonally, and it just mushrooms in complexity. The guitar has that built-in extra complexity, which makes reading music really, really hard on the guitar, and it turns it into this big chore. On the other hand, though, there is a flip side of the coin. There is a benefit of the chromatic instrument. So playing in one key is much harder on the fretboard than on a keyboard, but when you change keys, look at the keyboard again. Now, because it's set up to play C major, if you change to a different key, let's say A major, well, now you have to replace 3 of those white keys with sharps, 3 black keys. And now you have a different pattern for the major scale. It looks different under your fingers, and every different key looks different on the keyboard. Not so on guitar. Because it's a chromatic instrument, if we wanted to move from C to A, all we have to do is you take your major shapes that you've learned over the fretboard and you slide them down so that you put the key note on A, and now you're playing A major. All the patterns are identical. So changing keys on a chromatic instrument, super easy, whereas on the keyboard it's hard. But learning all the notes of the key is going to be much harder, whereas on the keyboard it's super easy. The bottom line, though, is that, of course, learning to read music when you have 7 different potential positions to play in or more, makes it 7 times harder. So that's really why it's difficult to learn how to read music from the staff perspective on guitar, because we're kind of trying to bridge across from a keyboard mindset and structure over to a chromatic instrument. Anyway, the original method that I did was called Heavy Metal Rhythm Guitar, Volumes 1 and 2. And I had this song, it's an instrumental song that I had written shortly before that meeting. I had played it in a band, I had recorded it, and like what I had at the time, like a 4-track recorder was pretty much all I had at the time. And so we had a version of it. And because it was instrumental, well, it would work well for this guitar method. And so I knew that I'd put that at the end of the thing. And it required some pretty good technique and a pretty good skill set, good all-around thing through a number of different kinds of grooves. So I thought, hey, this is going to be a great culmination. And I knew for myself, at least, that my inspiration, was music. And I mean, that's the point of it all. I wanted to, learn music, other people's songs, my songs. I wanted to develop a general level of technique, of course, to be able to play whatever I wanted, but it's music that was my driver. And of course, then I'm presuming that that's other people's driver as well, or at least one of them, or a primary driver. So I knew that a method that would just show you all the nuts and bolts without ever actually applying it to music would be really dry and boring. And, it's just not going to inspire people, to move through it. But if I could include music, real music, something that people liked, and, that people would learn, you could learn the nuts and bolts, but then apply it to something cool, well, I knew that that would work, and I knew that that would inspire people. And so I wanted this challenge, this capstone piece that would apply everything. So I knew that that's going to be the end of the method, and I knew that would be the beginning, would start with simple grooves. And so I just laid it all out and divided it up into 12 chapters. Well, it was only in the 90s when that guitar method was republished that I had an opportunity to rewrite it. And at that point, I realized, what I'm going to do is I'll go ahead and write a full song in each chapter. There's no reason not to have a song that pulls, all of the stuff together and applies it instead of just a bunch of riffs. Because I didn't think that the original heavy metal rhythm guitar method was that great. It did cover the basics. It would give you, the knowledge that you needed and apply it to a bunch of exercises and riffs and so forth. And also it dropped in, certain fundamentals of music theory and those sorts of things. But it didn't have enough music in it. And I fixed that problem in the 90s, and that's the current metal rhythm guitar method. And then it had 12 songs, basically, instead of just one song. And then it also makes a better parallel to the lead guitar method, which has its 12 solos. And I should also say that when I was in conversation with the publisher early on, so I had written this initial book, they liked it, they were going to publish it, said they can't, and then I came back and said, well, what if we use my music and I do this rhythm guitar method? And they liked that idea. Originally, it was supposed to be, one book, and it got split into two books only because it was a little bit too much material. When I actually, put it all together and sequentially, step by step, went through all these processes and all the stuff that I thought needed to be in it, they ended up deciding that they would split it into two volumes. That was something that didn't happen until after the manuscript had been written. At that time, I never thought that I would be able to write a lead guitar method. I just thought that was too ambitious. But after I had that experience, of doing the rhythm guitar method and kind of thinking through and writing it out and getting my thoughts, on paper and developed, well, it came to think about it, and I thought, well, if I was going to do a lead guitar method, what would it look like? Well, it would end with the same song, the solos. Now, that was pretty ambitious stuff. That song, Babylon, it has some pretty high level soloing in it. So I needed to reach what I would call, kind of a professional level of playing, or, really a level of shred playing. At least that's what it was at the time. And I knew that most of the time people would start with the rhythm guitar, at least for the basics, and then they'd get up to, a point of competency with that, and then they'd look at lead guitar. So typically, nobody's trying to play lead guitar until they're already intermediate level players. And at that point, I'm figuring, well, they've gone through the rhythm guitar method most likely. So they understand something, or they should understand something about pulse and everything. So I knew that I would start the lead guitar method at this intermediate level with a chapter that would review pulse. I knew that first solo had to be, at this introduction to an intermediate level. And I really wanted it to be rhythmic, that the lines be rhythmic, because if you can't play a rhythmic line, you can't play it well unless you feel pulse. Now, I can tell that to somebody over and over, but, how much of that really gets communicated? Well, usually not enough. If somebody's not aware of the importance of pulse, me telling them that, probably isn't going to do it. They need to demonstrate, they need to learn it for themselves. And so this first chapter sort of became like a trial by fire, where you could jump in and play the thing. And if you don't feel the groove, if it doesn't sound good, it's probably because you don't have a groove with it. And if you don't have a groove with it, then it'll be clear that, that you're not at the level to really be able to start this guitar method. So that was really the point of where chapter 1 started. I really wanted to make sure that some level of groove was there, because I knew that if you don't have that, you're totally sunk. You need to have a good grounding in that so that you can develop it. If you jump ahead and try to develop, a more complex rhythm, more complex groove, and you don't have basic groove, well, it's not going to work. You're never going to get the attachment. You have to attach groove to playing where it's simple first. So for the lead guitar method, I knew that I wanted to have, the same structure, a parallel structure to the rhythm guitar method. I wanted 12 chapters. The 12th chapter would be this solo, the crowning achievement here of that last song. And so I wanted 11 more. And I also thought, well, I had the bright idea at that point, well, I should write all these solos for it and really apply the material in each section, because I knew that you need enough repetition to really develop the skill set. And without songs, there's just no way to develop that amount of repetition. You need to immerse yourself in music, because when you start playing a song, you kind of get taken up in the song and you forget about the technique after a certain point. And then you just keep playing the music, and that sort of takes over, and that creates the momentum. And you don't realize that you've done the certain technique, 500 times or whatever. And that's really what it takes. So I knew it needed music. So I was going to put all these solos in. And the next step that I knew where I was starting, I knew where I was ending. Well, what I had to do is kind of figure out all the pieces in between. So I knew I wanted to touch a little bit on tapping. I wanted to, play in like a Dorian, I wanted to play a blues stuff. I wanted to play, rock minor pentatonic, and I wanted to, connect each to the next. So after the first chapter, I wanted to, take it up a notch. I wanted to move into 16th notes. But I knew that I needed to introduce 16th notes in the simplest way possible, like to make it as easy as possible. So you'll notice, like in chapter 2, there's a bunch of repetitive motions. It repeats a 4-note group. Well, that's a mechanic. So it's a, you pick, hammer on, pull off, pick. So that shape on the fretboard makes a pattern, and I'm going to repeat that pattern over and over and over. That same solo also used repetitively a different motif to a different pattern. And then I would use those patterns repeatedly to build bigger licks out of them. Well, there's two reasons for that. Number one, of course, that's a fine thing to do, in music. A thread runs throughout the entire song. You might hear the same motif used repeatedly, maybe in different ways, but the same kind of rhythm keeps repeating, so that you have this continuity. I guess that's the word I'm looking for. And I even talked about that as a principle in speed mechanics, continuity versus contrast. So, I knew that I wanted that, but the continuity of using the same physical motion and repeating it in licks is great for muscle memory development. So I knew that I wanted to do that. That's going to make the lick easier, because it's like, okay, once you can do it, you just do it again and again and again and again. And you got repetition, and you've also fairly quickly got something that actually sounds pretty difficult. It's kind of a weird thing, but on guitar, sometimes there are things that sound really difficult, and they're really not that difficult. And then sometimes there are things that don't sound particularly difficult, but they're actually very difficult to do. And licks that are built out of repetitive kind of mechanics are the easiest kind of licks to do. And so, when you first hear it, that second solo, a lot of people are thinking, wow, if I can do that, that's going to be awesome. I'll be a great player. And without too much trouble, most people, if they put the time in, they can do that. And so it's a real boost. I mean, it's a challenge, but it's a challenge that I've made it really as easy as possible. And all that was intentional. And so, gaining speed, that's one thread that moves throughout this entire, throughout the entire lead method. But another thing that moves is broadening the mechanics. So we start with just a cluster of a couple, And then we take those ideas and then we'll make variations of them. And then we'll combine with those variations, more variations come out. So it's not just about getting faster, it's also about broadening our repertoire of mechanics that we can accomplish. Chapter 3, I intentionally slowed it down, but I made it more complex because I went into something that is a bit more rhythmic. Now, every note is kind of its own thing. In other words, in Chapter 3, From the Heart, we're going to move through licks that use scale contours, but because they're triplets, number one, triplets are a little bit harder to play. And number two, they're not structured out of these patterns like a one-beat, four-note pattern that gets repeated. And so for that reason, they're actually quite a bit harder. There's also more string bending involved. And with the triplet rhythm, I threw in, some more difficult cross-string, accuracy is involved. So, the idea was here we start with Chapter 1, let's all get on the same page, and establish that. Then we're going to strive hard to get some speed going in Chapter 2 so that it's impressive, to ourselves and realize, hey, we can do stuff that can sound pretty cool. In Chapter 3, let's pull our tempos back down, but let's make it more difficult in some other regards. Like I said, the string bending and the scale contours and the accuracy about crossing strings and the rhythmic thing itself. Because when you're dealing with triplets, you don't have the same kind of momentum that you do when you're playing in fours. This brings up another issue that I knew that I needed to address in the lead guitar method. Picking is a big problem, and picking ultimately is probably the most difficult thing to master in regard to guitar playing, especially lead guitar playing. When you're looking at a book of transcriptions, like, guitar recorded versions or something, they'll show you all the notes and the bends and all the details, and they'll tell you, if a note, is sustained or whatever. They don't actually put in picking information. And you can figure out what notes are picked versus what notes are not by looking at the slurs and the ties and the bends and all that kind of stuff. But the reason that they don't put in picking is because they don't really know what the picking is, because they're going off a recording. They're not watching a video of the guy playing the thing. So, number one, you don't really know. But number two, it's possible that different people will pick things different ways. Some people would, play with, favoring certain kind of interactions, like between the strings, certain kinds of cross-string motions. So they might flip it around. Another person might play it different. So, they knew that, well, we could show you picking, but it's not exactly written in stone. And this is confusing a lot of people. How should I go about picking? And here's the thing about picking that I knew, and this was worked into the lead guitar method. It is, on the one hand, it's permissible to do things in different ways, okay? But if you're starting out and you don't have a specific way of doing it, there is a better way to go about doing it and a less good way to go about doing it. And my sense is that the better way is to have your momentum grow out of strumming. Like at simple playing, when you're strumming rhythms, you keep momentum so that when you do a tied note, you miss the strings, so you're playing down, up, down, up, up, down, up. You play da, 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 da. If you're going to play something like that with the syncopation that I just showed you, then, you could go down, up, down, up, down, which would turn it around, and it would kind of mess everything up because now your upstrokes sound a little different than your downstrokes. And then when you turn the rhythm around, it's not going to flow right. It's not going to sound right. But of course, what I'm saying is, you could play a rhythm like that, like say if it were power chords, and theoretically it could work. Well, why don't we do that? Why do you keep the momentum going? Well, because that keeps pulse more steady and your feel for pulse, because your pick momentum keeps everything moving. Well, when you go to play faster notes, you still have the same kind of momentum. It's obvious if you're picking every note, alternate picking, say 16th notes, it's down, up, down, up. And every 16th note you play, you maintain that. And that maintaining of the same motion keeps your momentum going. Now, sometimes when you're playing lead guitar, if you just have a little bit, where you don't pick, so you're mostly picking, but then maybe in the pattern you do a pull-off somewhere. Well, it's pretty easy to see that when you do a pull-off, you would skip the note the same way your strumming skips the note, but you maintain your overall pattern. So I'd call that your format. Like the alternate picking format is rhythmically determined, the same way that a strumming format is rhythmically determined. And that keeps your groove intact. That makes your lead playing sit with your groove. Because just as much groove, just as much rhythm in lead playing as there is in rhythm guitar. It's all notes arranged in time, and all those notes come back and have some relationship to pulse, or at least they should. If you want to be a good player, they do. So as you're playing, you have this format that follows the same strumming format. And what that typically means is downstroke on downbeat, right? And then go from there. If it's 16th notes, it's down, up, down, up. But what happens is, in a lot of places in lick playing, it becomes permissible to change those and to no longer follow the format. Because if you have so many pulls and hammers, does it really matter? If you hit it with an upstroke or a downstroke, if there's only a couple of notes picked in the whole lick, well, it really doesn't matter that much, because what happens is, instead of a momentum being maintained in your right hand, the left hand starts carrying the momentum. And then it doesn't really matter whether the right hand is following the format or not. And this is why so many players, like in guitar notation for the transcriptions, they wouldn't show the picking specifically. And it makes everything confusing. So I knew right away I wanted to show everybody the specific picking that I'm using, so there's no questions about it. You could say, hey, this is what I'm supposed to do. And the rule that I'm going to infuse into this is the format of momentum. I want everybody to follow the basic idea of momentum. And so that means, if it's a 4th, 16th note, I want you to pick it with an upstroke. Well, are there exceptions? Can you avoid, can you change it around and do it? Well, of course you can. But that misses the format. So I wanted to show you a format that would work and keep you in groove for everything. So that's what I did. And that way I could be specific about the picking approach. All that being said, that's another reason why triplets are even harder, because they're harder to keep the momentum. And with a slower groove, it's harder to keep momentum as well. And because you're picking with triplets, down, up, down, and then up, down, up, you're feeling upstrokes on down beats. And the format is going, from that point, is starting to erode a little bit. And we're starting to, include exceptions. Well, in any case, this was a big part of it, understanding the importance of picking in terms of rhythmic momentum and how important rhythm is in lead. This is why I've put, the format together as I have. Early in chapter 2, you've got, patterns that have a lot of hammers and pulls in them. That makes them a little bit easier to accomplish. Later, we're going to be picking more notes. The more notes you pick in a line, the more difficult it is to play. But it's not like one's better than the other. It's a choice of what kind of texture you want to create. If you want to do a run with all the notes picked, it's going to take practice to do, and it'll create that result. most guitar playing is, uses the bend and slide and hammer pull articulations. That's kind of what makes it sound like guitar playing. So, that's going on in most of the volume 1, like in the early part of the guitar method. Another thing I knew I wanted to do through all these different solos is I wanted each one to move into different keys and different kinds of keys. I knew I wanted to hit kind of a variety of styles of lead playing, which would be taken care of by playing in different kinds of keys. Because like a Dorian blues hybrid, is going to be a certain kind of a feel versus a natural minor hybrid versus a blues scale versus a harmonic minor or a major key. I knew that all of these different issues had to be hit, and I wanted to change the key. So chapter 1, A minor pentatonic, because most people, the first scale they learn is A minor pentatonic, so I wanted to keep it there. And then the second solo is in G. Well, notice here's another thread that's being developed. We're gonna move it down to G. Well, all you have to do is slide down 2 frets, right? Okay, so that's simple enough. I chose G because I didn't want to move it too far. If you move super far on the fretboard, it's the same thing, but it's hard to connect the dots and see just how similar it is. Whereas A down to G, it's not much of a shift at all. Shifting to G, by the way, is also a little bit harder because as you go lower on the neck, the frets are bigger. So whatever stretch you had developed to play in A, now that we're in G, you have just a little bit more of a stretch. And there's another idea. You do something, you learn it, and then you just stretch a little bit more. You make it a little bit more difficult. So we're increasing tempos. We are broadening our mechanics. We are shifting into different keys. We're taking our stretches and increasing them. Every single one of these ideas is its own thread. And I've kind of woven them all together. I basically would write out, these are the things that I wanted to put and how I wanted to increase from one to another. Another thing that I did in the second song is, of course, I'm playing in G here and G here, the octave position. So you want to start, you can see it looks and feels different to play high on the neck, but it's kind of the same thing. Then in the third, we drop 1 more fret to F sharp. And, we're also in the octaves. In the fourth solo, we're going to introduce the box 4 position pentatonic. And then we're going to move between those. So now we have 3 places we're going to play on the neck. So we're gradually increasing in that regard. Solo 4 was natural minor, natural minor and blues hybrid. And now there's also more picking involved. Notice some of the times, palm muting and picking on a single string. There's some arpeggiation in there. These are more difficult things than what we had done in solo number 2, and we're slightly faster. Solo number 5, now we're going to look at sextuplets. So we're going to take it up again. So we have some legato lines. Before we look at something like sextuplets that are all picked, that's going to be very difficult. Before we get there, we want to do it legato first because you want to make sure that your left hand is capable of playing it. So in chapter 5, we want to hit, it's kind of like the same thing I did in chapter 2. I want to hit some new benchmark, a new speed. And when I get there, I want to make it as easy as possible for you to hit that speed. So in chapter 5, I did the same thing. I went to make it as easy as possible to play, something fast, something that sounds, like it's going to, mess you up and burn up the fretboard. Well, it's pretty quick, but it's still relatively easy because the left hand is doing a 1, 2, 3, a roll, and you're going up across the neck. Definitely takes some practice, but it's nowhere near as difficult as like the sextuplet run that's all picked in solo number 10. You can see that, again, this is the progression. I put that in there purposefully. We're hitting a new level, but it's still relatively easy compared to what's going to follow. Song number 6 gets a little bit faster. Now I'm going to come full circle back to the key of A. And now I'm starting to introduce superimposing pentatonics and diatonics together. Now, I want you to be able to see those two things together. And the licks themselves sort of do that, because we've already played pentatonic in these shapes, and now the runs are going to be diatonic. And of course, we also, I introduced the bar, I think the vibrato bar, and some fret hand tapping. But the fret hand tapping, again, same thing. Very impressive looking and sounding technique, but not that hard relative to what it's creating. So at every stage along the way, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to give you the biggest bang for the buck, first, and then I want to broaden it. I want to broaden that skill set and continue as we move forward. Then comes volume 2. So chapter 7, now we're going to be in E. Well, we've been in the key of E in chapter 4. Now we're in E again. This time I want to do Phrygian dominant, or the Spanish flamenco scale. So we throw a major third in there and the flat 2. And, I just love that kind of feel. So this is definitely something I wanted to hit, that, super dark kind of modality there. And notice again, the speed's coming up. Now it's a slow groove, but now we're playing 30-second notes. And again, notice biggest bang for the buck. Now we're looking at the pick. And I have this lick that you're picking 4 notes on one string, 4 notes, 4 notes, 4 notes. Well, that's kind of challenging in its own right to play fast, picking and change between the strings like that. But 4 notes on a string, again, not too bad. It sounds fast and it sounds intense, but it's not like it's having to synchronize with all the left hand at that same speed. Much easier than doing that. So again, biggest bang for the buck in terms of something that sounds impressive and it has a good musical effect, and it's not super difficult, relative to, let's say, playing at that same speed and, playing more of a contoured run or something. So I'm looking for ways to make it as easy as possible to play something that sounds cool. Solo number 8 is in C sharp minor, and this is definitely Randy Rhoads inspired kind of solo. It's also a little bit, it's faster, number 1. The tempo is up to 160, but it's triplets. And again, I mentioned the difficulty of triplets before. They're a little bit harder in terms of momentum, in terms of picking. And the other thing that's harder about this solo, the tempo's fast, but because it's only 3 notes per beat, 8th note triplets, it's not blazingly fast. It's on the high edge of moderately fast. But here's what's more difficult with it. Every note is picked in the lick, so it requires synchronization between the hands at this moderately fast speed. And we haven't had too many licks up to this point, and certainly none at this speed, that involve that level of left and right hand synchronization. So that's definitely bringing it up a notch here. Solo number 9, now we have a major key, or major / Mixolydian actually, but this is going to be a brighter sounding solo, kind of a ballad thing, and the tempo slows down. We've got some runs though now. We've got, sextuplet runs, and now for the first time they're all picked. So this is definitely pushing it up another notch. Solo number 10 is sextuplets with the notes all picked, but now our tempos are way up, so solo 9 was, I don't know, maybe around 100 beats, maybe 92, or I don't know how fast exactly, kind of a relaxed pace really in 9. So the sextuplets aren't too bad, but in solo 10, Lightning's Edge, I think it's 124 beats per minute, and that's fast. 120 beats per minute in sextuplets is the same speed of notes as playing 16th notes at 180. And and that's really, really fast. So, we're definitely reaching for high-level technique by the time you're at chapter 10. And from that point, I think that's the first time we do harmonic minor too. So that I want you to look at harmonic minor as a variation off of natural minor. Once you learn something well, then you can take a piece of it and change a piece of it, and you create something new. Well, if you're coming in and you try to learn, let's say, natural minor and harmonic minor at the same time, you really can't do that well, because you'll be confused which one is which, and you're trying to learn two different things that are too similar to each other at the same time. The best way to do it is you learn one, and then you concentrate on that one thing until you really know it, like the back of your hand, and you know it, instinctively. Then you can make a variation of that and then practice that one. When you can do both of them, now you can grab one or the other, or even combine them in certain ways. And this is how, more and more options open up. That's the basic process. Chapter 11, now there's more tapping, and the tapping is learning something about arpeggios and how they relate to chord progressions. So there's kind of a classical cadence there, and it's got its own challenges. It's kind of more than anything, though, broadening your playing skills at that point. Nothing really harder in chapter 11, I think, than in chapter 10. There are some fast picked lines, so at this point, at that speed, they become things that you have to kind of like get down as reflexes, and you need those in order to play the solos in Babylon. So that, of course, is chapter 12. That's the final frontier, basically, for the method. Well, I've been talking a long time here. Hope you can get through all that, but if you're interested in how all those things weave together, that's kind of what I was thinking as I went to do this. The bottom line is I'm aware of all of those different systems. I'm aware that we have to have music to apply everything. I'm aware that you need to take step 1 before you do step 2, and step 2 branches into 3 and 4 and 5, and I also want, ideally, all of those solos to kind of cover a range of styles and a range of tempos and a range of different kinds of tonalities. And on top of that, the final thing that had to happen is everything has to stand on its own musically. If it's an exercise, that's great, but how much better is it if the exercise can actually be musically satisfying? And that gives it legs, and that gives it longevity, that you can keep coming back to it and practice it because it's a cool piece of music. So I needed to satisfy myself artistically that each one of these solos kind of, knew what it was. It wasn't some sort of generic thing that just sounds like, well, I could have gone here, I could have gone here. I want my lines to sound purposeful. That's what I heard in Randy's playing, Randy Rhoads, that inspired me so much, is that his lines didn't seem haphazard. It seemed like he was going somewhere specific. There was a melodic imperative in what he was doing, and that's what really drew me in to his playing in particular. And so I wanted to do the same thing. I wanted these solos to sound like they knew what they were, and they knew where they wanted to go, and they went where they wanted to go, and kind of touched on something, I guess I could say universal, something solid. I hope that gave you some insights. If you have any questions, though, about any of the stuff I've talked about here, feel free to make a comment, ask about them. There's probably some other things, that I forgot. Oh, here's something that I probably should have added about the rhythm guitar method. When I was doing the facelift or the rewrite of rhythm guitar, the course completely changed. I completely rewrote everything. I took the same ideas and the same song at the end, but I developed songs in each chapter, as I said before, but I also developed, all the riffs to lead up to those songs. And in that system, they're really brand new books. Whereas in the lead guitar method, it's pretty much the same method that was published all the way back in 1986 under a different title with a different cover. Then it came out, I guess it was 95 that the revised versions came out. So the lead guitar method really didn't change. And that's because lead guitar really didn't change. And frankly, it still hasn't changed. Rock guitar, metal guitar, soloing, it's all still basically the same techniques and the same stuff. Now, rhythm guitar, though, has changed a lot. And, tunings have changed and styles have changed, and the terminology has changed. So this is one of the things that I noticed. Really what makes a certain style? Well, a style of music is pretty much a social phenomenon that the music is there to sort of encapsulate and fuel. The sound captures the essence of what that message is, or that attitude, or whatever it is. And that attitude is the popularity of it says that it's speaking to some aspect, some social movement, or where a lot of people are. If you're not speaking to where a lot of people are, it's not going to be popular enough, and it's going to kind of either die or just exist in a really, really tiny way. But for music to go through these big changes and become what becomes popular has something to do with the feedback of what people like. And so it's about tying into a certain social thing. Well, here we're talking about guitar technique, and guitar technique, pretty much it's a similar technique to play, grunge versus metal versus, hair metal versus pop rock. Now, there are certain, kinds of chord progressions that are going to be in rhythms and tunings that are going to, separate the different styles. That's true, to some degree. But yet, there's a lot in common. And even the tones are very similar, And so when I was doing the rewrite in the mid-90s for the rhythm guitar method, it occurred to me that I could reach out and grab a lot of different styles, So there's, it kind of crosses a lot of lines. And we called it metal lead guitar, or metal rhythm guitar. Metal was a kind of a generic term. It's always the term for the heaviest stuff, but now it's 25 years later, and metal has kind of become a bit of a different thing, and there are different kinds of metal and so forth. But back in the 90s, we in the 80s, late 80s, we still called Poison was heavy metal. And it's pop metal. It's pop hard rock really now. But it's called, or you call it hair rock or hair metal, but it's really not metal. So the word metal has kind of been pulled out of it and reserved for what is metal now. But back then, metal was this kind of ubiquitous term. Anything with high gain guitar pretty much was metal. And in the 90s, that was starting to differentiate. And that's the reason that I decided, I don't have to confine this to 90s metal. I can take these techniques, and I can, move them toward all these different styles and sort of give you an overview around the whole center of what metal was. So anyway, that's the reason, I still don't think maybe metal rhythm guitar is maybe not the best word for it, but it still gives you kind of an overview. And more than anything, it gives you the musicianship to be able to, articulate yourself well on the guitar so that you can play, whatever you want to play. And that's the bottom line.